Good evening and welcome. Live tonight on the latest from 7 News. Breaking now, a woman mauled by a shark during a Sydney Harbour swim. The new promise Labor's given all property investors, but will they keep it? Payback time. America plots revenge for a deadly drone attack on its soldiers. And Sarah Lee strikes a sweet deal to save it from financial crumble.
The latest from 7 News with Chris Reason.
Breaking news to kick us off for our first show of the year. An incredibly rare shark attack in Sydney Harbour. Tom Saker is live for us tonight. Tom, what details do we have at this hour?
Oh, well, Chris, we do know that the victim is a 25-year-old woman who'd jumped in off a private jetty into the water here at Elizabeth Bay just before 8 p.m. this evening. She's believed to have been swimming out to a boat. It was on her way back to the boat where she was bitten on her lower right leg. Luckily, witnesses were there on that jetty and heroically jumped in to save her. One of those women, luckily, is a vet who applied a tourniquet to her leg. That may have saved her life. They dragged her back to land, where paramedics say she suffered critical injuries. A rescue helicopter was on standby at nearby Rushcutters Bay. She was, however, taken to St Vincent's Hospital via road, where she is luckily now in a stable condition. One of those witnesses spoke to us a little earlier. Here's what she had to say.
My wife's a vet and she basically bandaged it up, and the bone's broken and it's pretty hectic actually. But she seems to be okay. She's been in a lot of shock. Kept her warm, and my wife basically bandaged her up to stop the bleeding, because if she got bitten out there, she wouldn't have survived.
Incredibly traumatic, not only for the victim, but for those heroic witnesses as well who did all they could to help. Now, they believe it was a bull shark that is responsible for this attack. They are very common in Sydney Harbour, particularly at this time of year and particularly in murky, shallow waters like they are here. That's why authorities often discourage people from swimming in the harbour in places that aren't netted. Having said that, these types of attacks are incredibly rare, and this woman is very unlucky. The Department of Primary Industries will conduct a full investigation. Chris?
All right, great work from those bystanders. All right, Tom Saker there live for us in Sydney tonight. Thank you. Well, we were told, promised even, that there'd been no changes to Stage 3 tax cuts. Tonight, an assurance property investors will be keeping tabs on. The Treasurer says he isn't now zeroing in on negative gearing or capital gains tax. Jim Chalmers at pains to stress the federal government won't dig up an old policy dumped by Labor in opposition 5 years ago.
We're not contemplating or considering resurrecting the policies that we took to the 2019 election. Our focus when it comes to tax and housing has been on incentivising build-to-rent properties.
To political reporter Rob Scott in Canberra. Rob, we've heard that assurance before.
Yeah, we certainly have, Chris. It's the kind of language the Treasurer has used many times over the years when asked whether Labor was planning to change the Stage 3 tax cuts. And with that broken promise fresh in the minds of voters, the government is being taken to task over what other policies it may be willing to backtrack on. Today, it was negative gearing. Jim Chalmers denying that Labor is looking to scrap the controversial scheme, which former leader Bill Shorten promised to significantly wind back during the so-called unlosable 2019 election, which we know he went on to lose. And after that crushing defeat, Labor dumped the plan altogether. But there are some within the party who believe the scheme favours property investors at the expense of Australians trying to buy their first home, and they want that policy revisited. The Greens are also keen to see it reined in, saying if the government's prepared to change its mind on Stage 3, then it should be open to changes elsewhere. And Labor may very well need their support to get their Stage 3 rewrite through the Parliament, although the PM has already ruled out cutting any deals, saying he wants that new package to pass unchanged.
Rob Scott in Canberra, thank you. Well, tonight, Papua New Guinea is in early talks with China on a security deal. Our closest neighbour has been dealing with unrest recently. Its foreign minister says while Beijing has reached out with an offer, they haven't accepted it yet. The PNG government conscious of not signing anything that would jeopardise its relationship and agreements with Australia. And childcare subsidies are working. Out-of-pocket expenses down on average by 11%. But while a consumer watchdog report has found rebates are certainly helping, they're being chewed up by rising fees. The ACCC says the current one-size-fits-all approach is leaving less advantaged families without adequate, affordable options. The Early Education Minister is carefully looking at the recommendations, but not committing to them. We're being told to, quote, ring around to find a bulk bill GP. That advice from the Health Minister, encouraging us to vote with our feet, saying general practice is in its most parlous state since Medicare started. Last year, 1.2 million Australians delayed a visit due to cost. Well, there are calls from US politicians tonight to retaliate against Iran after 3 American military personnel were killed in a drone strike in Jordan. At least 34 service members were injured in that attack at a logistics base called Tower 22 near the Syrian border. President Joe Biden is vowing to respond, blaming Tehran-backed militants. We've heard from some Republican congressmen urging a direct counterattack against Iran. Let's go to military strategist, retired Australian Army Major General Mick Ryan. Mick, good evening to you. Firstly, what more do we know about this attack? And specifically, do we know if it was definitely ordered by Iran?
Well, g'day, Chris. The attack occurred on an American outpost. It's right on the Jordan-Syrian border. In fact, it's on a 3-way border with Iraq as well. It's been there for quite some time. It was established when the Americans were countering ISIS in Iraq. 3 American service personnel were killed, unfortunately, and about 25 more were wounded in an attack that appears to have centred on one of their accommodation buildings.
Now, there have been about 170 attacks on US forces since the Israel-Gaza conflict began, so no surprises perhaps that one has finally had a lethal impact. The question will be, what will be the American response? What will Joe Biden do?
Well, I think the key word here is careful calibration, to be quite honest. The Biden administration is very careful about escalating situations. We've seen that in Gaza. We've seen that in Ukraine. And, you know, there's some who are proposing that Iran should be attacked. Well, they need to be cautious here because Iran could then take the shackles of Hezbollah, who have 150,000 missiles pointed at Israel. My sense is they'll probably focus more on Quds Force commanders and Iranian Republican Guard commanders who are deployed in places like Syria, advising these different militias that are attacking the Americans.
Yeah, Mick, I've heard it called the Goldilocks syndrome. Too hard and you risk an all-out war, too soft and you risk them striking again. But he has no choice. He has to do something more severe than the US has done to this point.
Well, absolutely. This is certainly crossing a red line, whether it's declared or not. You don't kill American servicemen and get away with it. Under the Obama administration, they allowed the Syrians to cross a red line to use chemical weapons, did nothing about it. I don't think the Biden administration will make the same mistake, that they'll be very cautious in their response, I believe.
And I note the US President's words at a time and manner of our choosing. Mick Ryan, we appreciate your time this evening.
Thanks, Chris.
Dangerous levels of rain are coming for Queensland tonight. 100 millimetres expected in 24 hours. Much of the state is under flood watch. Severe weather warnings have been issued for the soaked southeast, set to be hit by more storms off the back of Cyclone Kirrily. 13 dams spilling now. Troubled North Melbourne player Taron Thomas is tonight awaiting the outcome of his hearing at the AFL Integrity Unit over new domestic violence allegations. The 23-year-old was questioned for 2 hours alongside his agent and lawyer. The league says the investigation is ongoing and he'll stay away from the club as it unfolds. Tonight we learned Braden Maynard was questioned by Collingwood about an early morning crash. It was a minor prank, but he missed training because of it. Police say they received complaints from witnesses that a car matching the players was seen swerving and cutting off other drivers. To Bethan Yeoman at Victoria State Parliament, where the government has decided against a ban on duck shooting. Bethan, it ignored a recommendation from its own inquiry.
That's right, Chris. Last year, a Labor-led inquiry into the sport recommended it be banned, but today that was dismissed. The government rejecting its own probe, saying it's only advice. The decision caused outrage among many MPs, one crossbencher vowing to no longer cooperate with the Allen government on future legislation. Now, instead of the ban, there will be changes that aim to make the sport safer and more sustainable, including a 6-bird limit for hunters, a delayed 8 a.m. start time throughout the season, training for shooter accuracy and Aboriginal cultural awareness, and harsher penalties for those who break these rules. Duck hunting was outlawed in New South Wales, Queensland and Western Australia more than 2 decades ago. Victoria's season will now commence in April and will run until June. Chris.
All right, thanks, Bethan Yeoman there for us in Melbourne. An urgent drug alert is out tonight. 3 people hospitalised in Sydney after taking what they thought was MDMA. The pills actually contained nitazene, a potent opioid that can cause unexpected and severe overdose or death. The drugs are a rectangular orange or red tablet with a Red Bull logo. A man jailed for helping to cover up one of Australia's most notorious crimes is tonight preparing to walk free. Mark Ray Hayden was sentenced to 25 years over the Bodies in the Barrels murders in the 1990s. The 65-year-old's prison term ends in May. The South Australian government is chasing legal advice to stop his unsupervised, unrestricted release. Animal welfare groups are planning a live export protest tomorrow with 15,000 sheep and 2,000 cattle stranded on a ship tonight off Fremantle. The vessel should have been halfway to the Middle East, but it was turned back due to unrest in the Red Sea. The animals have been on board the carrier for more than 3 weeks with no end in sight. Well, next to Europe correspondent Ashley Mullaney live in London, where King Charles is extending his hospital stay. Ashley, good evening to you. Do we know why?
Good evening, Chris. Well, no updates from the palace yet, although reports were he was supposed to stay in here for 2 nights. Last night was his 3rd night staying at this London clinic behind me. Now, King Charles is said to be doing well, having undergone treatment for a benign enlarged prostate. Queen Camilla has visited him multiple times to keep his spirits up. We are told that he has had his calendar cleared now for the rest of the month, well, for the next month. So even when he gets out of hospital, he'll probably be okay to attend to government documents but not go to any formal engagements. All expectations are that if things have gone well and the King is in good health, that we could see him discharged today, though. But as you know, Chris, the King is a notorious workaholic, so it will probably be difficult for him to put his feet up and rest from here on.
And Ash, what are we hearing about Princess Catherine's recovery from abdominal surgery?
Well, it was 2 weeks ago, Chris, that she was taken into this London clinic for planned abdominal surgery. Unlike the King, we don't know much about the nature of her health condition. But the palace did say at the time that she would be in hospital for about 2 weeks. So it could be any hour, any day now that we see Princess Kate released from hospital. She is staying in this same London clinic where the King is right now. He did go in and say hello to her and see her before he went in for his own treatment. We know that William has been in to see her too, and the kids are said to be taken care of both by William and the Middletons are giving a helping hand as well. She will no doubt be eager to get back and see the children, but clearly she's going to need some downtime too. The palace has said that she won't be seen at any public engagements until after Easter.
All right, Ashley Mullaney there live for us in London. Thank you. Well, it was $450 billion in debt. Tonight, the death knell's been sounded for what was once China's biggest property developer. Evergrand Group is being ordered into liquidation by a Hong Kong court after failing to reach a workable plan with creditors. It could knock confidence in the slumping property sector with potential to stir a global slowdown. Farmers are threatening to shut down Paris as they protest for better working conditions. Producers are planning to choke major highways, putting the capital under siege. The French government has deployed 15,000 police and military officers, ordering them to stop them clotting the city. Even word of its demise had us running to the frozen food aisle at the supermarket. Tonight, a saviour for Sarah Lee. The dessert maker, at risk of crumbling, has been rescued, and the new owners have a particular affection for the brand. We'll tell you about it next on the latest from 7 News. Sarah Lee has been saved. Its local business sold to an Australian family. Clark and Brooke Quinn say they shared in the tradition of having the brand's apple pie and vanilla ice cream every Sunday night at the dinner table, adding they're proud to put the Aussie-made and owned stamp on the brand. More than 200 jobs have been secured thanks to the sale. The couple was also involved in rescuing Darryl Lee from administration in 2012. Well, for more, I'm joined by Griffith University retail expert Graham Hughes. Graham, good evening to you. When Sarah Lee went into administration in October, Australians rushed to buy their frozen cheesecakes and pies. How much has that nostalgia factor for these desserts helped save the brand?
Well, I think it's gone some ways. Both staff and the Australian public definitely rallied in buying those goods and sticking by the brand, so it definitely helped them.
Now, we know the Quinn family rescued Darryl Lee chocolates back in 2012. They've got a reputation for doing this, the saviours in the industry. Is it a big risk for the Quinn family to be going and taking this step?
Well, it's certainly not uncharted waters. Both Clark and Brooke spent 16 hours, reports were, in the offices turning around Darryl Lee. So they definitely do know what they're doing, very seasoned operators, and will be looking for opportunities in the marketplace to disrupt and really put Sarah Lee back on the thoughts and minds of Australians. What
does it mean for the company to be Australian owned and stay in Australian hands?
Well, I think that the Australian public now have one of the storied brands to be able to rely upon. We remember many brands obviously going offshore. Vegemite were one of them before the bigger company bought them back in 2017. So for Australians, they really look to support their own. So this is another great example of a company remaining Australian owned.
It is, but they're up against some major forces of diet, though. There's been a wave of more health-conscious shoppers. What impact could that have on moving Sarah Lee forward?
Certainly the shoppers these days are far more health conscious and considerate from their purchasing behaviour. But as well, there's a lot of innovation and a lot of future potential available to Sarah Lee. So there's a lot of different collaborations and reinvention of that brand still to be had in the marketplace.
Graham Hughes, we greatly appreciate your insight into that very sweet deal we've announced tonight. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Well, I'll have tomorrow's weather forecast in a moment, plus the newest trophy hunter in tennis. Jannik Sinner savours his Oz Open success and tells us what the extra spotlight means for his future. We're back after this. Time for a check of the weather around the country now. Starting off in Brisbane, heavy rain tomorrow, a shower or two in Sydney, cloud in Canberra, top of 24 degrees in Melbourne, sunshine for Hobart. Adelaide will be mostly clear, Perth set for a hot one, blue skies and 35, and drizzle on the way in Darwin. In our regional centres, partly cloudy in Mackay, a fine day for Bendigo, 32 degrees, Port Augusta bracing for a windy one, and a forecast high of 43 degrees in Alice Springs. Well, there's a new kid on the block for tonight's final frame. Jannik Sinner basking in victory after his maiden tennis Grand Slam, the first Italian to do so since 1976. 22 years old, dethroning Daniil Medvedev to be crowned champion of the Australian Open. What a rapid rise. At 14, he left his home with his parents' blessing to chase this dream, eternally grateful to his, quote, awesome, perfect mum and dad for letting him go. Success came quickly, but it wasn't easy, and he says he knows he'll have to work even harder now. A name etched into history. Our final frame. Well, thank you for your company this Monday night from the team. That is the latest. I'm Chris Reason. Good night.
Stream 7 News anytime, live and on demand on 7 Plus. And with 7news.com.au, you'll know the news now.